Naam.
I put the link for the Ties That Bind seminar at the top so people can benefit from that, the one that you did some years ago. Inshallah, I think some people might benefit from that as well.
Double click. What is wrong with your phone, bro? Yeah, see how it's like. Thank you. Alhamdulillah. Is it? Yeah, it's good. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. So, first of all, let me difficulties that delayed us. And let me, as always, thank you all for coming out on a Monday, coming out in large numbers, Jazakumullah khairan, and coming out for a very important series that we will be in Islam. Our journey will take us through getting married, being married, staying married, conflict and conflict resolution while married, and getting unmarried Islamically. But before we begin swimming in the deep waters, I wanted us to wade in with a few important introductory points. So, the first point is that marriage is a team effort or a team sport. See a lot of sisters here, alhamdulillah. How many sisters here are married? Just 2 hands, 3 hands. Come on, there's more sisters who are married. Only 2, 3 hands went up. All right, let me ask you this question. Those whose hands went up, how many of your husbands are here? Okay, so 2 out of 4 or 2 out of 3. See, I mentioned, okay, let's see married men here. Let's see hands for married men. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, good. About 9. And how many of your spouses are here? 1, 2. See, when we talk about marriage being a team sport, a team effort, it means that both partners have to be vested. And so what I would encourage is that couples come together and they compare notes afterwards. Because if only one of the couples or one of the members of the couple come, then only one of them is really what? Striving and pulling and working. And that may not be good. The improvement that is desired will not be necessarily seen or realized, because marriage is supposed to be a team effort, it's supposed to be a team sport, but they're not actually working together. It's just something to think about. But the second introductory point I wanted to make was I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience. So somebody might ask and say, what qualifies you, meaning me, now you can put this on the feed you wanted to, because I got the other one up there. So what qualifies you, meaning me, to speak about love and marriage? So I could easily say, okay, I've completed a comprehensive study. I've completed a comprehensive study of marriage in Islam during my training. I've done extensive reading and research on the topic. I've lectured on the topic a number of times. I could say that I've counseled couples in crisis. I could say all those things to prove my competence. But I'm going to be honest with you, brothers and sisters. I feel that what qualifies me more than anything is not my school training, but it's what I learned from what we call the school of hard knocks. So my personal experience in relationships, the mistakes I've made, and the mistakes that have been made against me, and what I've learned from them, I think those are some of the things that qualify me more than anything else. I want to say, and I'm speaking from the heart here now, because this is a topic which is very important to me. It's a topic which is very close to my heart. I think today I would consider myself a happily married man. But I can honestly say I wasn't always that way. In a previous marriage, I knew misery and sadness intimately. I was married for about 23 years, and most of those years were unhappy. And so when people talk about being unhappy in their married life or in their marriage, I can empathize. I know what that feels like. When my marriage came to an end, I didn't just blame the other person, but rather I took a good hard look at myself. I had to. And I also reflected on what went wrong in that marriage, and I resolved myself to do two things. Number one, not to repeat the same mistakes I recognized I had made. And number two, not to subject myself to the same conditions that sowed the seeds of discontent, bitterness, and resentment that ultimately led to what? The dissolution of that marriage. So I want to speak to you a lot about introspection, about taking a look in the mirror, a hard look in the mirror. And when I do that, I'm not asking you to do something that I haven't done. I'm going to speak to you about destructive behaviors. And I'm not going to be speaking, no, do whatever you need to do, sure. And so when I speak to you about these destructive behaviors, I'm not going to be speaking just from my book knowledge, but I'm going to be speaking from practical experience as well. I want to say this as it relates to experience before I move on to the next point. And that is, brothers and sisters, insanity is when you do the same thing repeatedly, but you expect different results. I knew that when I got divorced, if I wanted my next marriage to be different, I had to be different. I had to do things differently. And I had to marry someone different. And I had to be married under different circumstances. I had to create a culture in my marriage that was going to be different. So the results would be what? Different. So I learned how to be a better spouse, I think. I'll have to ask my wife after this class, inshallah. I learned how to be a better spouse. And I learned what a healthy marriage looks like, not just from the books, but from my personal experience. I'm going to try to share that with you so you don't have to go through the school of hard knocks like I did. Inshallah, bi'idhnillah. But the next point I want to make, or the next introductory point, is I'm going to give you a few questions that I think we should contemplate together. And so I'm going to ask these questions. They're not rhetorical questions. They're questions I'm expecting you to give me a response for. And I want you to speak, whatever you think. There's no wrong answer, inshallah ta'ala. So the first thing I'm going to ask you is, why do people get married? So some people get married because it's the sunnah. Because it's from the deen to the point of the Prophet. So much so that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, marriage is so much so from the deen that the Prophet ﷺ, he said in the hadith, he said, إِذَا تَزَوَّجَ الْعَبْدِ فَقَدْ اسْتَكْمَلَ نِصْفَ دِينِهِ. If an individual gets married, he has completed half of his religion. So that's certainly true. Some people get married because it's the sunnah, because it's part of the deen. Like anybody else? Why do people get married? Companionship. Don't want to be alone. Don't want to be by myself. Is it hard to be by yourself? Honest, it's hard. Nobody wants to be by themselves. Nobody wants to be friendless, wifeless. work in an office by themselves, right? Nobody wants that. Companionship. Ahsan. Tayyib. Why do people get married? Children. Want to have progeny. Want to keep their family's good name going, right? Mumtaz. Tayyib. Any other reason why people get married?
Have money.
Huh?
Have money.
Money. Perhaps the wife is rich. Family's rich.
So she go to work and I'm babysitter.
So I can marry into the family and be rich too, right? I can live in their big house, and that's a good answer, you should. Tayyib, huh? Why do people get married? Huh? Love. Some people get married because they fall in love. Tayyib. Now, we mentioned a few. We mentioned love. We mentioned the sunnah, part of the deen. We mentioned money. We mentioned companionship. We mentioned children. And we could mention other reasons. Question. Are these the right or the wrong reasons? It depends, he said. Tess, what do you guys think?
It's not wrong.
Not wrong to marry for money.
Nope.
Not wrong to marry just to have kids. Just want to have a bunch of kids running around and...
It depends.
Okay, it depends. I'm just asking you. Okay, before you answer that question, think about that question in light of this question. How can these motives, and this is how we have to think, how can these motives affect the outcome of marriage? Let's say I just married because I wanted to have kids. How could that affect the outcome of the marriage? Huh? Like if I only married to have kids and my wife couldn't have kids, then what's going to happen to that marriage?
It's going to begin.
I got married to have kids. You can't have kids. You're out of here. You guys see that? I'm saying if you married for that, if that's your only intent, that's what. I'm saying if in this marriage, if I only married you to have kids, okay, let's say.
You can adopt.
Like, we have to be serious. We have to be serious. And I'm not saying you don't make a good point. I'm not even saying you don't make a good point, but I'm saying we have to be serious. If we marry for because I'm coming to a point here. But let's take a different one instead of the children one. Okay? You married just for money. She's rich, her dad is rich, family's rich. They have this great business. So if I marry her, her dad will give me a job in the company, I'll make good money, I'll be rich too. How could those motives affect what? Affect the outcome?
You don't have any self-success.
Huh?
You don't have self-success.
But that's one thing, you don't have self-success, but how could it affect the marriage?
The money.
Huh? What if her father goes bankrupt? What if he was sitting on a bubble and the bubble burst? As soon as I say I do, he says, hey, by the way, I'm bankrupt. Good luck. So then what? I married for the money and now there's no money. What's likely to happen to that marriage? I don't love her. I'm not even attracted to her. It was all about the money. What's likely to happen to that marriage?
Yeah, he gonna leave.
So, Jazakallah khair. And the Shaykh, he said in Arabic, he said, that which is for Allah, it will be continuous. And that which is for other than Allah, it's going to ultimately come crashing down. So basically the point I'm trying to make is that, the point I was trying to make or trying to help us get to, is that if we marry for the wrong reasons, the results are not going to be what we hope for. Okay? They're not going to be what we hope for. So now we talked about some of the reasons why people get married. And I'm not saying all those reasons were wrong. But most of those reasons were something that the person who got married expected to what? Receive, to get out of marriage. They want to get something out of marriage. The question I have for you here now is, should we expect to get something out of marriage?
Yes.
Should we expect that? Are we in all agreement? Is that unanimous?
Yes.
Does everybody agree that we should expect to get something out of marriage? Okay? All right, ahsan. We're going to circle back to that. We're going to circle back to that. But before we circle back, I want to ask you, what is marriage? What is marriage? Huh? A union between two people. Very good start. I want you to add to union sacred. It's a sacred union. And I want you to add to it at the end that union is supposed to be founded on something. It's supposed to be founded on something. Founded upon mutual tranquility. You guys understand that? Marriage is supposed to be founded on mutual tranquility, which means that, and this is important, we're going to talk about this more, is that the husband is supposed to be made to feel tranquil and at peace by the wife, but the wife is also what? Supposed to be made to feel tranquil and at peace by the husband. Mutual tranquility. It's not just, hey, you do everything you have to do to make me happy, to make me comfortable, to make me tranquil. And who cares about your tranquility? Who cares about you being at peace? That's not the way it works in Islam, and we're going to see that shortly. It's also supposed to be founded upon something that Ammar mentioned. It's supposed to be founded on love, right? Love. You said sunnah. Who said love? That was Ahmed, Abu Mustafa. It's supposed to be founded on love. That they're supposed to try to the best of their ability to foster love between themselves. And that's important too, because that lets you know, people will ask, well, how am I supposed to behave? How am I supposed to conduct myself? And they think that there's like this like scroll with all of the things that you do's and don'ts written on it, and you just have to follow that strictly. No, what you have to do is you have to make love your objective, and then behave the way a person would behave if they wanted to be what? Loved, and they wanted to show a person that they love them. If you just do that, then you'll achieve your objective. And it's also supposed to be founded upon compassion. Compassion. Meaning that I actually care how you feel. I care how what I do makes you feel. That is marriage in Islam. Sacred union. ويدل ذلك, and this is evidenced by the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَكَيْفَ تَأْخُذُونَهُ وَقَدْ أَفْضَى بَعْضُكُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ وَأَخَذْنَ مِنْكُمْ مِيثَاقًا غَلِيظًا. And how could you take it back? Meaning, how could you take back the mahr, the marriage gift that you gave your wives, after you have gone in unto each other intimately, and your wives have taken a solemn commitment from you, a sacred union, a sacred pact, a solemn commitment, founded upon mutual tranquility, love, and compassion. وَيَدُلِّ ذَلِكَ, and this is evidenced by the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. And among His signs is that He created for you from yourselves mates, that you may find tranquility in them. And He placed between the two of you affection and mercy indeed, and that are signs for people who reflect. And here, before we go to the next point, I wanted to emphasize this last one that He mentioned, ar-rahmah, compassion. Brothers and sisters, compassion is a critical component of a successful marriage. You have to care. You often hear, and I've heard as a counselor, I've heard couples say, I don't care anymore. When you stop caring, your marriage is over. When you stop caring, your marriage is over. Why? Because when you're in trouble, you have to work to get out of it. And if you don't care, there's no impetus, there's no motivation to what? To work. You guys see that? So compassion is a critical, you can never, the people who say whatever, It's over. This is a word that does not belong in marriage. A marriage that's supposed to mean something. A marriage that's supposed to matter, that whatever, I don't care. Once you say that, you're dead in the water. Compassion is a critical component for a successful marriage. Another introductory point, brothers and sisters, is marriage is give and take. So we said that marriage is a sacred union. We said it's supposed to be built on mutual tranquility, love, and compassion. In addition to that, and I know it sounds cliche, but marriage is what? It's give and take. What should we give? What should we take? It depends. It's not the wife should always give this and the husband should always give this and that's it. That's scroll again. So the husband wants to see, okay, what should I give? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have to give her food. I have to give her shelter. I have to give her clothing. And that's it, right? And then the wife goes, okay, I have to give him dinner. I have to give him, it's not that. What you have to give is going to depend on the needs and wants of the person you're married to. Because it doesn't do us any good to give our spouses something they don't want, provide them something they don't need, while denying them the things that they actually want and the things that they actually need. Marriage is not about us. Like, it's not about just me. Like, okay, this is what I feel comfortable giving, and that's all I'm going to give. No, marriage is about give and take. What do you need? And that's what I'll provide. Every person, and correct me if I'm wrong. If you feel differently, tell me, no, I feel differently. Every person who gets married, they get married to have their needs and wants fulfilled as much as possible. How many people here who are married or thinking about getting married think about, I want to get married so I can do what somebody else wants, and it doesn't matter to me if they do anything I want. I'm getting married to give this person whatever they need, but I'm not interested in getting anything back. I'm not interested in getting my needs fulfilled. Anybody agree with that? No, nobody wants to be in a marriage where they just do what? They just give and give and give, and they never take anything. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to be in any relationship. Nobody wants to be in a friendship where you just what? You give and give and give, and that person never won. Right? That person's like, hey man, I'm on the side of the road over here on 77. Can you come and help me fix this tire? You drop everything and you go help. You give. It's my friend. Person says, hey man, I'm a little short on my rent. Could you loan me $200 at the end of the month? Sure, you give. Person says, hey man, I need this. And you give. You give. You give. And then you say, hey man, can I borrow a pencil? I just want to write down somebody's phone number. Like, no, man. It's like nobody wants to be in a friendship where you give and give and give and you ask for the simplest thing and they won't give. The same thing is true for any relationship. Yeah, you're comfortable with giving, but you also what? You want to take when you need to take too. That's just the reality. Consequently, and this is a very important section right here, yeah, ikhwan wa khawat, is that spouses need to recognize the needs and wants of their spouses and provide those needs and wants to the best of their ability. And if we refuse, if you, despite your capacity, you can do it, but you just willfully decide, you know what, I'm not doing that. I'm not giving you that. Or you just can't fulfill them. You don't have what it takes to what? To fulfill those needs. Then there's going to be problems. And those problems are going to be rooted in happiness, resentment, and dissatisfaction. Person is dissatisfied. Person resents you because you can give it, but you just refuse. Although they're what? They're giving. Or they're unhappy because their needs are going unfulfilled. And I wanted to give some examples here, and I'll try to give those out of ujala. The first one is, for example, let's say you have a husband. And the reality of this husband, he has trust issues. And he needs his wife to earn his trust and to dispel his insecurity. He has some insecurity issues. He has some trust issues. That's just his reality. And so his need coming into the marriage is what? I need to feel like I can trust you. And I need to feel secure. I need you to basically put my insecurities to what? To bed. I don't know, you guys tell me, is that something the laborers? Is that something the person's asking like too much? So what if a woman says, I'm not doing that? I'm not going to let you, like for example, I leave the house and I'm letting you know where I'm going. When you call me, I don't answer. I don't text you and let you know where my whereabouts are. And so what does that do? That fans the flames of what? Of insecurity and mistrust. When to be honest with you, would it be any skin off her nose if she just sent a text? Called. This is where I am. Whatever. So this is an example, and some of us might think it's a minor example, but this is a real life example. Where one of the partners in the relationship has, for example, trust issues. And they just need to be reassured by the other partner. They need to have their insecurities put to bed. It's something simple they're requesting, and the person just won't do it. Not because they can't do it, they just willfully choose not to give. It's going to create problems. It's going to sow the seeds of resentment, dissatisfaction, etc. Give you another example. A wife wants to feel appreciated and valued. Wants her husband to make her feel like he recognizes her contributions and sees her. I'm asking you, is there any skin off his nose if he does that? If he says thank you? If he says, you do a lot for me and I appreciate it. I wouldn't be able to get out of here in the morning if you didn't help me making the coffee and ironing my shirt and whatever. Is there any skin off his nose to do that? A lot of husbands won't do it though. If the wife is struggling, trying to manage everything, right? Trying to maybe get breakfast done, iron that shirt, got a little one crying, and maybe in the course of all that, burns her hand. And she doesn't say anything, but everything that's going on screams, a little help, a little help. And he doesn't what? He doesn't help. Makes her feel like what? He doesn't see me. He doesn't see me. I'm nothing to him except what? Except a laborer. Have to be careful, ya ikhwan, about this because, again, we're talking about marriage being what? Give and take. He's taking that breakfast, he's taking that cup of coffee, he's taking that shirt. He needs to give. Hey, you want me to? Okay, let me grab him. And I'll take him out. I'll give him his bottle. I'll do this. I'll burp him. I'll whatever I need to do to what? To get him out of your hair so you can do these other things that you have to do. You burned yourself. You know what? Go treat that. Forget this breakfast. I'll grab something on the way. Give and take. I could give a lot more examples. I won't because of the time. But I do want to say, and we'll ultimately talk about this when we more in more depth when we talk about the getting married phase of it. But this, what we're talking about here, this wants and needs, giving and taking based upon the wants and needs of your spouse, this is what is meant by compatibility. Compatibility, it means that you either have similar wants and needs as the one you're going to marry, or who you are, what you can do, and what you're willing to do match up with what that person needs and wants. And so when you guys get together, what they're needing and wanting, you can easily what? Provide it, and you're willing to provide it. This compatibility piece is something that we often don't assign enough importance to. You'll have, for example, young people trying to get together, or old people trying to get together, for that matter. And they'll go to people who will marry them, like an Imaam or something like that, a sheikh, whatever. And they might say, I have some questions. Like they might make a long list of questions that they want to ask to try to ascertain compatibility. And that Imam or sheikh might say, just get married. You'll figure it out. You like her, right? And she likes you, right? So just go ahead and get married. What's the big deal? You'll figure it out as you go. No, we want to make sure we're compatible so that I don't waste his time and he doesn't waste my time, they say. So that's one example of how we just don't give any importance to compatibility. Another example is what? A lot of times in certain cultures, people like to marry within the what? Within, not even the culture, within the, say it, preach, say it. Family. Marrying cousins and, like that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think the mindset that drives it is wrong. The devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. The devil you know is even better than the angel you don't know. I'm going to marry somebody who's in the family. Just going to throw him off on my brother's, throw my daughter off on my brother's son. Even though they might not be what? Compatible. And more often than not, especially nowadays, those marriages are ending in what? In divorce. And also ruining the relationship in between the families. Because now that brother is mad at that brother. You see what I'm saying? Another one is, this is who I, the father, or this is who I, the mother, this is who I like for you. Again, not assigning any importance to what? Are we compatible? And that opens the door to what? As we said, problems. It's going to lead to problems, and those problems are going to be rooted in unhappiness and resentment and dissatisfaction because there's no what? Compatibility. There's no meeting of the minds in terms of what the needs and wants, the mutual needs and wants. So now another thing that we have to think about as it relates to this one is, how do I know if I can fulfill that person's needs? How do I know if I'm compatible, if I'm right for them? First of all, I need to know myself and be honest with myself. And this is another critical part of being a spouse. Know who you are. And this is really important. We're going to see this before you get married. Before you run off and go get married, do you know who you are? Do you know what you have to offer? Do you know what your capabilities are versus your incapacities or inabilities? What can I do? Ask yourself, what can I do? What can't I do? What am I incapable of? Am I able to communicate my capabilities and inabilities? Some people lack the ability to articulate their own reality. They might recognize, this is not me. I can't do this. I'm not able to give someone this. But they can't what? They can't articulate that. They can't express. They're very inarticulate when it comes to what? Expressing these realities about themselves. And some people, which is another problem we're finding in marriage, they're outright deceitful. They're outright deceitful. They know they don't have this and they can't give that. But rather than saying that, they do what? They lie and say, yeah, I can do that and I'm able to do that and I will do this and I will do that, etc. Another question we have to ask ourselves to know ourselves. Okay, we asked, am I able to communicate? Suppose a person is articulate. They can communicate their idiosyncrasies, their shortcomings. Am I willing to communicate them? Is it easy to say, I have this shortcoming, I have that shortcoming? Is that easy? Is that easy to say? No, nobody wants to say that. When we write our resume, you don't say, nah, I really don't know much about MS Word. We don't do that. We say we can do a bunch of things that we can't. يُرِيدُونَ يُحْمَدُوا بِمَا لَمْ يَفْعَلُوا. Right? They want to be praised for what they haven't done. So, many of us out of shame or pride, we're not willing to communicate even if we can. And that's also a type of deceit. We're not being honest with ourselves. We're not being honest with that other person. And last but not least, am I flexible or am I inflexible? Some things are deal breakers. So I need to be honest about those deal breakers. For me and for her, right? But another thing, if I know, how am I going to know if I can fulfill these needs of my spouse? You have a question? Okay, all right. I said I need to know myself. I also need to what? I need to know my spouse. I need to know my spouse, which is another essential component in a successful marriage. I need to know who I'm dealing with. I need to know what those needs and wants are. And this is the sad thing to me, ikhwan, is that in many cases, the man or the woman, they're very explicit about what they need and want. They know what they need, they know what they want, and they will tell you, they will spell it out for you. And somehow, some way, we just miss the point. It's like when you're in a marriage, you have to be in the zone. If you really value that relationship, you have to be in the zone. I'm listening to whatever you're putting down, I'm going to pick it up. I'm listening to what you're saying. Especially if you're going to tell me in unequivocal terms, this is what I need. This is what I want. Know your spouse. Sometimes they don't tell you. Sometimes they don't tell you in words, but they tell you what? In their actions and their behavior. We have to pick up on that. We have to care enough to pick up on that. But ثم بعد ذلك, in order to be able to fulfill those needs and wants, we need to abandon selfishness, which is also essential. If we starve, see, when a person is a me person in any relationship, me, the other person is being, in that relationship, is being starved emotionally. What would you do if you were in custody, but you weren't held, like you were someplace and you were free to go? And in that place you were being starved in terms of food, deprived of food and drink. You're hungry. And if you continue without your needs in terms of food and drink and nutrition, you would perish. What would you do? The gate is open. Okay? So you're in custody, but it's a loose custody. You can just walk out of the gate. Would you stay there and starve to death? None of us would. Same thing is true in a relationship if you starve your partner. Then either they're going to die from emotional starvation, or they're going to go look for what? For satisfaction and gratification elsewhere. Pay attention. We're not dumb. We're smart people. But in our relationships, we conduct ourselves as if we're dumb. No offense to anyone. But I'm just saying this reality, this is common sense. If I starve this person, if I don't give them nothing that they want, nothing that they need, they're going to get it somewhere else. طيب ثم بعد ذلك let's circle back now to what we talked about. What are we supposed to get out of marriage? What is marriage supposed to produce? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us actually in the Quran, the Prophet tells us in the Sunnah what marriage is supposed to produce. I'm going to give a list of three. Although this is not an exhaustive list, I'm going to give you a basic list that kind of is very comprehensive in terms of if we just understand these three things for ourselves and for our spouses. Inshallah, our relationships are going to be very fruitful. The first one is Allah wants us to get out of marriage being a garment for each other. He wants the husband to be a garment for the wife and the wife to be a garment for the husband. We're going to talk about what that means. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنَّ. This is in Surah Al-Baqarah, the second surah, verse number 187. He says, they, your wives, are a garment for you, and you are a garment for them. A garment means four things. That means Allah wants to, just by saying this, Allah wants us to get four things out of marriage. All of them under being a garment. The first one, He wants us to be a sitr. He wants us to be a covering that conceals faults. My wife's faults are going to be covered by me. And her deficiencies are going to be completed by me. And my faults are going to be covered by her, and my deficiencies are going to be completed by her. That's what? Sitr, a covering. I won't be exposed. And the things that I'm ashamed of people knowing about me won't be known. Not because I'm like doing some horrible, terrible, unspeakable things, but because I'm human. And vice versa. And so these things are going to be what? Covered. So that's one thing Allah wants us to get out of marriage, a sitr. Another one, firash, a bed. And that is an allusion to intimacy. He wants us to find a partner with whom we can share those intimate moments and fulfill those natural desires lawfully. Number 3, lihaf. Lihaf is like what? You guys know, like you get a piece of candy and you do what they have on the outside of it. It has what? A wrapper, right? Something wrapped around it. Is that not so? And that lihaf, it's actually touching and protecting the candy from what? From lint and other things that would make it inedible. Similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He wants each spouse to find in their spouse someone who they can be extremely what? Extremely close to. He wants them to find a best friend who will insulate them from the pressures and the difficulties of life, which brings us to the 4th one, second. Somebody who puts you at ease. We go out in this world and life beats you down. You go to work and your boss tells you how bad your work is and threatens you with termination if you don't meet this deadline. Your colleagues are rude to you. You go out and you work with customers or clients and they mistreat you. You go to the store and you tell the butcher how you want the meat, and the butcher doesn't do the meat the way you want, and then when you tell him it wasn't the way you want, he has some choice words for you. You go on and on and on until you come back to the house, and that's the place where you're supposed to find what? Somebody who won't beat you up, somebody who won't insult you, somebody who won't say mean things to you, somebody who won't mistreat you, somebody who will build you up after the world has done what? Has beaten you down. And that's for both spouses. And Allah wants us to get that out of marriage. And He says all of that by saying what? Libas, a garment. Number 2, He wants us to live in a way with each other which is generally accepted as what? As appropriate. He wants us to have a life, a relationship which is, generally speaking, is happy. As He says in the Quran, He says, وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, and live with them in a manner universally accepted as good. And last but not least, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we mentioned earlier, He wants us to get tranquility, He wants us to get love, and He wants us to get mercy out of our relationship. He wants us to foster a relationship or have a relationship which fosters tranquility, love, and mercy. We mentioned the ayah from Surah Al-Rum, number 21, the 30th Surah, verse 21, which supports that. Now the question comes as we draw to a close, how do we achieve that? How do we get that? How do we get all these things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants marriage to produce? And traditionally what people have done when they talk about marriage and how do you get these things out of marriage, is they talk a lot about rights and obligations, duties and entitlements. They talk about the wife is supposed to do this and this and this, and she's entitled to this. And the husband is supposed to do this, this, and this, and she's entitled to this. And they stop there. And I'm not saying that that's wrong. We need to know what we owe to each other. We need to know that. But the problem with just sufficing with that, only talking about that, rights and obligations. Duties and entitlements is that you basically, without realizing it, you create a culture in the marriage of scorekeeping. You guys understand what scorekeeping means, right?
Yeah.
It basically means I did this, and now you owe me. And I have assigned a specific value to the thing that I did. And so now when you give or you make your contribution, if it doesn't meet the value that I've set, then I feel shortchanged. And now I'm bitter because I gave all of this and all you gave was that. That mentality of scorekeeping, it sows bitterness, it sows resentment, it sows animosity, it creates tension between the couple. They're always keeping score. Well, I did this. Well, I did this. Yeah, but that wasn't on the same level. That wasn't on the same weight as what I did. And that bitterness is going to what? It's going to lead to the ruin of the marriage. It undermines everything that we talked about marriage supposed to produce, or what marriage, or everything that we mentioned that marriage is supposed to produce. It undermines that. Love and tranquility and compassion and being a garment for each other. You can't have that if you're constantly keeping what? Keeping score. I want to mention 3 last points and we'll open for any questions or comments and then we'll close. Number 1, I want to say, so our approach is going to, I just want to say this first out, our approach is going to be different. We're not going to just talk about rules and entitlements. We're not going to talk about it that way. We're going to talk about making those things, those items, those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said marriage is supposed to produce, make that our objective. And then what are the actual behaviors that will lead to those outcomes? That's what we're going to talk about. That's how we're going to approach it. 3 points. Number 1, brothers and sisters, marriage is serious business. It is not a joke. It's not something to play with. It's not something just to get into to fulfill your animalistic desires. And that's the end of it. That's all I expect to get out of it. Marriage is not like that in Islam. It's not a play thing. It's like a gun. It's not something to be played with. Because people get hurt. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and we mentioned it previously, the ayah, He said that marriage is mithaqun ghalidh. It is a solemn commitment. It is a sacred pact between a man and a woman. It's not something to be played with. And we have to look at it Islamically. The same way we look at prayer, the same way we look at faith, the same way we look at avoiding haram. We have to look at it's serious, not something we joked about or laughed about or played with. Number 2 from the last 3 points is marriage is not supposed to be, pay attention to this, marriage is not supposed to be hard. Not supposed to make us miserable. There's a very warped conception amongst many Muslims, many couples, period, is that they'll say something like, for example, if it ain't rough, it ain't right. Marriage is hard work, they say. And what they mean by that, it's supposed to be drudgery. You're supposed to be miserable. Marriage is supposed to be miserable because it's hard work. That's what they say. This is totally not true in Islam. In the ayah in Surah Al-Rum, Allah says He gave us wives so we will be what? Tranquil. Gave wives husbands so we will be tranquil. Not to be miserable, to be happy. That's one of the main things Allah wants marriage to produce is happiness. It's not supposed to make you miserable. That's a wrong understanding. And the sad thing is that some people, when everything is going good, they feel like they have to introduce misery into the marriage. They have to introduce conflict. Because if it ain't rough, it ain't right. Something ain't wrong. If we ain't fighting, our marriage is headed for dissolution. We're going to come apart at the seams. We're going to sink like the Titanic unless what? Unless we fight. No. If you're happy, that's a good thing. Another way we know that this is a wrong concept, wrong understanding, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whenever He mentions conflict in the marriage, He basically mentions mitigations. He mentions ways to minimize conflict. He wants the conflict to be minimized. He talked about, for example, al-imra'a nashiza, the woman who misbehaves. And he told the man, do this, do this, do this, to correct what? To correct her behavior and get her to stop misbehaving. Same thing, he mentioned the man who's what? Nashis. The man who's misbehaving. And what the woman should do to what? To get him to not misbehave. When they have irreconcilable differences, Allah said, oh, don't divorce. Do this, this, and this. To make yourselves happy and to bring yourselves back together. It means what? Allah doesn't want us to be unhappy. And if we do have irreconcilable differences, and the marriage is just what? Misery. He prescribed what? Divorce. He didn't say just stay married and be miserable. No, he said if you're making each other miserable and it's impossible to make each other happy, then get divorced. Those are indications for us, brothers and sisters. In our religion, marriage is not supposed to be something that makes you miserable. Last but not least, la darar wa la dirar. No harm to self, no harm to others. Since marriage is supposed to make us happy, it's supposed to be something that fills us with tranquility and peace. If two people are in a marriage and they're just harming each other, or one spouse is harming the other one, and they're incapable or unwilling of refraining from harm, then they should not be together. And I'm going to be honest with you, there's no shame. There's no shame in parting ways if you just don't belong together. That can happen. There's no shame. Doesn't make the guy a bad guy, doesn't make the girl a bad girl. It's just, we just weren't meant to be together. And it's okay if they admit that, so that they can go and be with somebody that they can be happy with. And we have to understand that it is haram in our religion to harm somebody unnecessarily. It's also haram to expose yourself to harm, subject yourself to harm unnecessarily. That's what the Prophet meant when he said, La darar wa la dirar. No harm and no harm to others. No self-harm and no harm to others. And with that, brothers and sisters, we have completed our introduction. Bi'idhnillah, we'll begin next week talking about how do you get married in Islam. Any questions, comments, or complaints or critiques going once? Can't be quiet on this. This is one of those issues we have to talk about. Unless you guys are just tired. It's like 8:30. We're ready to go home.
Question.
Atfadal.
Two individuals that are compatible with one another. Right? You know how like
Amira here in South Carolina, and as you were speaking about Sister Amira, hold on.
No, she can go ahead. She can go ahead. Let her go ahead. We'll give it to her.
Go ahead, Amira. As you were talking about a tranquil relationship, a tranquil marriage, I reflected back on my marriage. Notice I said back on my marriage. And one thing that I can honestly, truly, with Allah as my witness, even if Allah was my only witness, I had a tranquil relationship. And it feels different. No drama, none of that stuff. You know, I wasn't familiar with that in my relationship because it was never expected. You know, because we're following Islam. Inshallah, you know what I mean? So I like when you talked about the tranquility of the relationship because it's a rhythm, it's a flow. You know, there's a up and down, side to side, you know, black and white, colorful array of joy in a tranquil relationship. So thank you for the flashback. I was flowing, you know, and it feels good. And may Allah grant me another one.
Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Thank you very much for that, Sister Amira. Jaziti khairan. طيب, anybody else? تفضل Sheikh.
So my question is, two individuals that are compatible with one another, could it also be possible that they're too much alike? You know what I mean? Like incompatible, you know, meeting each other, you know, in these, you know, basically, you know, they got a lot in common. But if an individual or two individuals too much alike, that could also be like odds with one another. Am I correct?
Exactly. So the brother Jazakallah khair, he asked, he said, two people who are very, very compatible, highly compatible, is it possible that they could be too much alike? And therefore that could create problems. I want to stress and emphasize that compatibility is not just being alike in terms of personalities, or likes, for example, likes and dislikes, or interests and career goals or goals for the future. But what I was trying to stress on more as far as compatibility is recognizing the wants and needs of your spouse and being ready, willing, and able to fulfill those wants and needs. That's compatibility. And they may not necessarily be alike in terms of personality. They may not be alike in terms of their future goals, right? But they're alike, or they're compatible in the sense that I recognize that these are your needs and wants, and I'm a person who can
help in that.
readily, willingly fulfill those needs and wants. And I'm also adaptable, because don't needs and wants change over time?
Of course.
Yeah, so I'm adaptable as well. I think that's where the compatibility lies, and that's what I was trying to get at. Yeah.
I was just kind of like trying to.
And yeah, you make a good point. Yeah, it's possible. There's no question. Like anybody else going one time? Tafadhal Ammar. Wa alaikum salam.
A lot of times, there's a broad statement when you at a sit down and someone say, "I'm looking for someone Quran and Sunnah." That's a very broad statement, because you may do a Sunnah that they may not do, and vice versa. And also, they say 4 reasons you should choose your spouse, which that 4 should be their deen, which is another broad statement. And also, you know, the sit down period is a very critical period where our Muslim leadership, a lot of our Muslim leadership don't go into detail, because when you sit down with somebody, I don't care what books, what hadith, what fiqh, what minhaj you own, you got to see if this person is sound to be married. You know,
MashaAllah.
Did they have any past traumas? You know what I'm saying? Sexual, physical, emotional, cultural abuses. You know, and these questions don't get asked during the sit downs, or the Muslim leadership don't even go further into detail. Like when they say marriage is half your deen, what does that have? You know, what does that have you got to do?
Jameel. Tayyib, with respect to Brother Bilal's comment, Jazakallah khair for that comment. We kind of touched on the lecture, and I guess we'll expand on it here. That marriage is no place, especially when we're talking about getting married and determining if a person is the right person to marry. That is not the time or the place for vagary. It's not the time or the place for ambiguity. So he said, they'll say, for example, what are you looking for? A person says, I just want someone who is Quran and Sunnah. Meaning they follow the Quran and Sunnah. That's like he said, it's very broad, it's very ambiguous, what do you mean by that? And obviously that person who says that, whether it's a male or a female, they have needs, they have wants. And either they know what those are, they should know what those are, and if they know what they are, they should articulate them. And they shouldn't say Quran and Sunnah as if that's all I need. Because then when they get married, the real needs will be demanded, and the person will, you didn't tell me that. And if you had told me that you needed that or you wanted that, I would have told you, I'm not prepared to give that. So yeah, there's no place, Jazakallah khair, there's no place for ambiguity or vagary at that moment. He said, person says, I just want somebody who's on their deen, is what you said, right?
Could complete half of their deen.
No, before that you said they're on their deen.
Yeah, like the 4 reasons you should marry someone, that first one being their deen.
Their deen. So they're on their deen. And yes, the Prophet said in the hadith, he said, Tunkahul mar'a li arba'. He said a woman is married typically for one of four reasons. Or four reasons typically. He said لِجَمَالِهَا, for her beauty. وَلِمَالِهَا, for her wealth. وَلِحَسَبِهَا, and for her what? Her status. وَلِدِينِهَا, and for her religion. فَظْفَرْ بِذَاتِ الدِّينِ تَرِبَتْ يَدَاكِ. Said, get the religious one, or you'll be the loser. He also said in the other hadith, he said, إِن جَاءَكُمْ مَنْ تَرْضَوْنَ دِينَهُ وَخُلُقَهُ فَزَوِّجُوهُ إِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا تَكُنْ فِتْنَةٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَفَسَادٌ حَرِيضٌ. He said, if a young man comes to you seeking the hand of someone under your charge, then marry her to him if you're pleased with his character and his religion. If you don't do it, there will be trials and tribulations and much corruption in the earth, which we're seeing a lot of that nowadays. I say all that to say that the reason why the Prophet stressed deen is because what we expect is that a person who's religious and committed their religion and fears Allah will fear Allah regarding their spouse. Will be afraid to do something that they know is going to displease Allah as it relates to their spouse. But again, it's no place for ambiguity. We need to be specific to make sure that that person understands, because a lot of people who are unfortunately religious are the people who sometimes are the worst when it comes to what? Relationships, marriages. It's like they feel like as long as I'm fulfilling God's right, that's all that matters. When in reality, no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't just want us to fulfill the rights of Al-Khaliq, the Creator. He wants us to also fulfill the rights of what? Al-Khalq, the creation. As the Prophet said in the hadith, اتَّقِ اللَّهَ حَيْثُ مَا كُنْتَ وَأَتْبِعِ الْحَسَنَةَ السَّيِّئَةَ تَمْحُهَا وَخَالِقِ النَّاسِ بِخُلُقٍ حَسَنٍ. He told Mu'adh when he was sent to Yemen, he basically told him, I'm going to give you some advice. And the first half of the advice is related to what? Allah's right. And the second half is related to what? The rights of the people, meaning I want you to understand, it's not just about Allah's right, it's not just about the people's right, it's about Allah's rights and the people's right. So he said, اتَّقِ اللَّهَ حَيْثُ مَا كُنْتَ. He said, wherever you go, fear Allah. Realize that your Islam has to travel. Don't say, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Have to be Muslim wherever you are. وَأَتْبِعِ الْحَسَنَةَ السَّيِّئَةَ وَأَتْبِعِ السَّيِّئَةَ الْحَسَنَةَ وَأَتْبِعِ السَّيِّئَةَ الْحَسَنَةَ تَمْحُهَا. He said, and follow an evil deed with a good one, because it will do what? It will wipe it out. وَخَالِقِ النَّاسِ, and treat the people well. Be on your best behavior when you have interpersonal relations, when you deal with others. And so, when we talk about deen, what the person has to understand is what we mean by deen. How you treat other people. That's a big part of the deen. Especially when it comes to your wife, because the Prophet said in the hadith, and I don't want to go too long, he said, أَحْسَنُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِيمَانًا أَحْسَنُهُمْ خُلُقًا. I'm sorry. Yeah, he said, wait. No, this one he said, أَكْمَلُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِيمَانًا أَحْسَنُهُمْ خُلُقًا وَخِيَارُكُمْ خِيَارُكُمْ لِأَهْلِهِ. He said, the believer which has the most complete faith is the one who has the best character, and the best of you are those who treat their wives the best. And so this is what people have, the connection has to be made. And I agree with you that, that religious leaders have a responsibility to clarify. Somebody says, sister, do you like the brother? I'm just looking for somebody who's Quran and Sunnah. I'm just looking for someone who's deen. No. They got to make her be more specific. It's true. Because why? Because that ambiguity leads to problems. That same couple will come back and have a bunch of problems because they didn't really communicate their needs and their wants. طيب, any other questions going? تفضلي, and then Ahmad, and then we're going to close. تفضلي.
Okay, so you're talking about in this lecture about marriage, but how do you find for young couples? How would you advise young couples that don't know if they're compatible or not, and where do they find this compatibility, and what are the steps to make sure that they achieve that they're compatible before actually
getting married? Yeah, I'm hoping that we'll discuss that in great detail in the next lecture, which is going to be about getting married. So we'll talk about that. But basically, I think that that's where parents and that's where leadership comes in. Like Brother Bilal said, it's basically they have to say, okay, let me help you. Because, yeah, this is new to you. This is uncharted waters for you. So let me help you determine who you are. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What can you do? What can't you do? What do you want? Versus what do you need and what can you give a spouse? That's where these elders, whether it be parents, whether it be, like you said, leadership, they have to kind of help these people understand what marriage really is, this give and take, wants and needs. You're going into it. What are your wants? Do you know what it is? Help them understand that. And it might not be easy, but you help them kind of get to a point where they have an idea of, yeah, this is what I want to get out of this. Alhamdulillah. Okay, great. Now, what does your potential spouse want? And are you able to give that? Help them see if, yeah, I'm able to do those things. So, for example, let's say, and sometimes they might not be able to be honest with themselves, and that's where the parents and the elders will come in and say, hey, come on, that's not you. So, for example, let's say that some parents have a son, and this son has never, he's flaky. He's never committed himself to anything in his life. Every time he says he's going to put his mind to do something, he never sees it through. They know this about him. And he's never been able to hold a job for more than a few months because he's flaky. This is what I really want to do, and he starts doing it, and he's like, yeah, flames out, and let me go find, no, you know what I really want to do? I want to be a pilot. You know what I mean? You know, I don't want to be a pilot, I want to be a chef. You know, I don't want to be a chef, I want to be a fireman. You know, it's like that with him, even though he's in his 20s. So now he wants to get married, and they want to help him get married, and they're trying to help him understand who he is and what he can offer and what he can't offer. So now he gets not engaged, but he expresses interest in a sister. And that sister says, look, I already have a 5-year plan for my life. I'm going to finish my studies, and I'm going to do this, this, and this. And I just need to be in a very stable environment so that I can achieve this, this, and this, and check these boxes. This is her need. This is what she needs, or this is what she wants. And she said, can you do that? And he says, yeah, I can do that. There won't be any upheaval. There won't be any, you know that's not him. And so you have to help him see that's not you. And you don't want to be deceitful. Yeah, so to answer your question just in a nutshell, and we'll talk about it more, inshallah ta'ala, in the next lecture, is that's basically what they have to do. That's basically what it would look like in terms of helping them understand compatibility. That, yeah, you like this girl, and she a very nice girl, but she's not the girl for you because you're not able to give her this deal-breaking thing that she wants. Does that kind of answer it? Like, okay, Abd'Llah Ammar.
Yeah, so I had a couple of comments.
Uh-huh.
I think the answer to all problems, whether be it marriage or anything else in life, is found in the Quran and the Sunnah. And I believe, when you talk about, like, when someone says, I want the other person to be on the Quran with the Sunnah, it's not really an ambiguity.
Yeah, tafadhal, I got you. Ambiguity, yeah?
Yeah. So it's not really that. It's just the ignorance of the majority of the Muslims of the Quran and the Sunnah and the understanding of it, or the real application of it in real life. Because the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad has all the answers for all the problems. And if a person really applies what the Prophet Muhammad used to or if the person applies what the Prophet Muhammad used to, how he used to treat people and how he showed people, he's the best role model. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو اللَّهَ وَالْيَوْمَ الْآخِرَ. Indeed, for you is the best role model is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whoever that seeks the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the final day of judgment. So when a person, if any person like have any problems, if they seek knowledge into the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, start applying it in real life, they will find all the answers to all the problems, whether it be marriage, economics, anything, politics, anything. The Sunnah have all the answers. So I think the best answer to all these problems is to seek more knowledge and to apply what you know. Once you know it, then apply it in your life, and then you're not going to have any problems at all. And everything will be solved completely.
طيب,
I agree with you, like about compatibility is very important thing, definitely. And when a person, says that I want someone to be following the Sunnah, it means really apply what the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to deal with his wives and how he showed to people.
See, Ammar, everything you said, none of it's wrong. The problem is that, well, there's two things. One, you said if somebody says Quran Sunnah, that's clear what they mean. And then you said what it means. That's what it means to you. But that's not what it necessarily means to the person next to you. That's where the problem is.
This is what it's supposed to be.
I understood, but that's not the reality. You see what I'm saying? And we have to deal with things as they are, not as they should be. And what Bilal is talking about is that, people get in these sit-downs and they say, I just want somebody from Quran Sunnah. So you say, I'm Quran Sunnah, khalas, let's get married then. And then they come to find out, so we're not in disagreement.
I know.
What I'm talking about is the reality versus the theory. How things are versus how they should be. The second thing is that if I come to an audience like this and I say, okay, we just need to follow the Quran and Sunnah in our relationships, that wouldn't be wrong. That statement wouldn't be wrong. But honestly, do people really understand in a practical sense how to follow the Quran and Sunnah in their relationships?
This is what we have to teach them.
Right, and that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing.
Teach ourselves and them to all follow this
And-
and apply in real life.
Yeah, but that's what we're trying to do in a practical sense. And we're doing it bil masail. So rather than speaking generally, look, just follow Quran and Sunnah and everything will be fine. We're-
Exactly, we need to study fiqh, we need to study the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, his seerah, how he used to deal with people and how he used to do everything, so we can do exactly the same. Because
And
if
this-
we don't know, we can't do
And
it.
this is what we're trying to do here, is that basically go mas'ala. Talk about specifics. Talk about where we go wrong and what does going right look like. And then help people apply that in practice. And sometimes it's just not enough if we speak in generalities. I think there's a statement of, I'm trying to think of this. I'm trying to think of the statement of, I'm trying to think of the statement of one of the fuqaha, but basically what he said was, if we stay fil umumat, if we just focus on the general things, and we don't talk about specifics.
That's not what I'm looking for.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. So basically, we're in agreement. If we all were just to follow the Quran and Sunnah, all of our problems, not just the problems,
We have to learn it and apply it.
and that's what we're trying to do.
As the companions of the
And that's what we're trying to do here as it relates to marriage. And it requires teaching because we're not like the companions.
Absolutely. I think, if we use the hadith a lot more and
Well, this was an
teach
introduction.
them the hadith and teach them the explanation of it and the application
See,
of it.
I mean, like when you're dealing with real life, you got people that work 12 hours a day that got a little bit of time to study Islam. Then when they get off and where they got
This is the
books
problem.
into their
This is the
spare
problem.
families.
We put in a lot of time for dunya, but not enough time.
Walaikum salam.
Look, everybody got different imams, so they're gonna run to the deen, and some people gonna crawl to their stomach to the deen. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
So you got to come to what they understand.
I could forward them to you, and inshallah they can be covered next
Yeah,
week.
please. I know there's probably a lot of questions. If you could just kindly collect them
You right, you right.
and send them to me, and then
Abd'Llah, do you want to take any questions from the stage? Because there's about 4, 5, 6 people on the stage. Do you want to take 1 or 2 of those or no?
I would like to, but it's getting late here. and there's a lot of discussion going on, sidebar stuff, and it's unfortunate. So if we
Tell my man he's hogging up the mic, man. Tell him you don't want to have Ali Saab come down.
so if we could collect the questions, and inshallah ta'ala, what I'm willing to do is one or two things. Either do like a separate session where we'll just do the questions, and I can work with Zahid on scheduling that. So we'll just do the clubhouse questions in a separate session, or we'll maybe answer them at the beginning or at the end of next week's session. So we'll work that out, Sister Zahid and I, and we'll go from there. Let me close. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Now, promoting on Clubhouse, inshallah, on the stage.
Yes, sir.